Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about another false dichotomy. Modern philosophy, and the way academics do philosophy is full of false dichotomies. And this is a big one. This is materialism versus dualism. We're going to talk about at the end why this is a false dichotomy. But first, we need to understand what each thing is. So materialism is the idea that there's only material in the universe, and understanding the material can explain everything that there is, especially with consciousness. This is what we're focused on. Dualism is the idea that there are sort of two substances. There is the mind, which is understood sort of spiritually, and there is the body, which is understood materially, and these things are separate. We're going to watch an analysis here. I'm going to comment on it as we go. And then at the end, I'm going to give my integrated view. So without further ado, let's start.
And it's the result of connecting materialism and idealism in the wrong way.
So, okay, I apologize, but I think it's really helpful if we just try to define terms like what is dualism, what is idealism, what is materialism for people who don't know.
So the idea of dualism in our cultural tradition is that there are two substances, a mental substance and a physical substance, and they interact by different rules. And the physical world is basically causally closed and is built on a low-level causal structure. So they're basically a bottom level that is causally closed, that's entirely mechanical. And mechanical in the widest sense. So it's computational. There's basically a physical world in which information flows around, and physics describes the laws of how information flows around in this world.
Would you compare it to like a computer where you have a hardware and software?
The computer is a generalization of information flowing around. Basically, what Turing discovered, that there is a universal principle. You can define this universal machine that is able to perform all the computations.
Okay, let's stop here a little bit. So you see, it's a little bit messy. It's a little bit undefined with terms. They asked to define 3 terms there, and he really didn't do that. But this is usually the way these things are discussed. So let's take the example of the computer. When Lex asked, is dualism sort of like a computer where there's software and there's hardware? Like in a way, yes, right? So for instance, we're talking about consciousness. There is no consciousness without both a mind and a body. But to separate them as being functionally 2 different things is to drop the context. Like my body, what I am, or any conscious being is the integrated whole. We cannot separate and divide up our identity into smaller parts and still make sense of it. We must understand it in its complete integrated nature. Of course, there are no minds without bodies. There are bodies without minds. Essentially, non-living things are just bodies in a way, and living things are, conscious beings rather, are an integration of these 2. So yeah, a computer, if we take the example of a computer, if we just have hardware and no software, well, that's not a computer. It can't do anything. And of course, it doesn't make sense to have just software without it being located somewhere with some hardware. So just even the concept of a computer cannot be broken down into lesser parts. The computer is the integration of the hardware and the software, in the same way that conscious beings are an integration, a unified whole. Let's continue.
So all these machines have the same power. This means that you can always define a translation between them as long as they have unlimited memory to be able to perform each other's computations.
So would you then say that materialism is this whole world is just the hardware, and idealism is this whole world is just the software?
Not quite. I think that most idealists don't have a notion of software yet, because software also comes down to information processing. right? So what you notice is the only thing that is real to you and me is this experiential world in which things matter, in which things have taste, in which things have color.
Okay, so there's already a lot going on since I last paused. So he's saying, is materialism just the hardware and idealism just the software? And he says, well, idealism hasn't quite got the software yet because what is it attached to, which is a good point. But then he starts talking about all we have is our perception, essentially. We have our taste and our touch and our sight and these things, which is true. But to say that's all we have is false. Okay, so animals, conscious beings, right, all have perception. Perceptions are these sense data, the integrations of sense data. To reduce humans to the perceptual level is to deny what makes humans fundamentally human, and that is our conceptual faculty. We have concepts. So what are concepts? Concepts are integrations of percepts that are abstracted using reason into concepts. Concepts are groupings of things that based on their similarities with certain measurement omitted. Like for instance, we have the concept of a car, right? Like we know the characteristics of a car. It generally has four wheels. It has doors. You drive it. It can. It's powered by some sort of an engine, and it goes forward, and you can stop, and it transports you places. It doesn't matter what color it is, for if it's a car or not. It doesn't really matter how big or small it is. We can identify a toy car and even like a large truck as a sort of a car. And how do we do this? We don't need to view every single car to know what a car is when we see it. It's because we abstract from, we use abstraction from our percepts. We perceive these individual cars. We see other cars. We group them into a class or a concept. And we know that each different car is its own, has its own identity as a unit, but it is not unique in the sense of being completely different from every other unit within the class. So we have this conceptual level that is created using reason. And this is what we have. We don't just have our percepts. We have our concepts as well. So to reduce us just to the perceptual level is to negate our reason and negate what makes us uniquely human, which is so common. Everybody does this. Let's continue here.
Phenomenal content and so on.
Oh,
and
you are bringing up consciousness. Okay.
And this is distinct from the physical world, in which things have values only in an abstract sense. And you only look at cold patterns moving around. So how does anything feel like something?
Okay. Well, so yeah, you heard that at the end there, that we have only abstract values that are just in the objects themselves, and it's not real. It's just we experience it being real, meaning that values are just based on our feelings or intuitions, which is not true, right? Values are created by living things to help live their lives well. Values are things that we have and we want to keep because they are in some way judged as being good for us. And how do we make this judgment? Well, it's not just on the perceptual level. It's not just using our feelings and our emotions and our whims and our intuitions. No, it is using our reason. It is forming concepts. The concept of a value, of why it's good, is formulated and validated using reason. We view the world and its characteristics and the objects, the identities within the world. We have our values that we have determined based on what we think will help us live well. And we objectively create this value and validate it using our reason. So back to the dualism versus materialism debate. Both are wrong, because materialism just says that materialism is all there is. Like, for instance, this is the view of most scientists, because they don't see anything but material in their charts, in their microscopes, telescopes, and so forth. And they say, oh, well, this is just the way it is. Sam Harris is quite famous for this view of just straight materialism. And as he says, quote, consciousness is already hard to operationalize, meaning to make sense of, or to deal with, rather. But it's hard to deny consciousness. But then he'll go and deny free will. Free will is, I don't know exactly how he understands it, but I think it's the illusion of choice, as he would say. I mean, we definitely have choices. Conscious beings are volitional. To say that conscious beings are not volitional, and volitional means that they are choice-making beings, is to say that conscious beings are no different from just any material in the universe. So then how do you describe, for instance, all the things that life creates, especially human life? How are computers created and everything if we just look at material? Well, it would have to be some sort of mystical way, right? These are the sort of mystics of material. Materialists are fundamentally mystics, because they say, oh, well, material is all there is, and our computers and our cars and our everything is just created from material, which denies our rational capacity, our conceptual faculty that is integrated using reason. It denies all of this because you can't see it under your microscope. And likewise, dualism will say, okay, well, we have our sort of spiritual conscious faculties, and we have our physical faculties, and these things are separate. And maybe even at war with each other, as Plato would say, that our mind and our body are at war, or rather our reason and our emotions are at war. But this can't be. We are our integrated whole. We are everything. We are our percepts and our concepts. We cannot just separate these two things. So I said that everything boils down to consciousness, right? Well, then you might ask, where does consciousness come from? That's a good question that nobody has an answer to. But just because we can't answer where does consciousness come from does not mean that we can deny the existence and efficaciousness of consciousness. For instance, if I asked you, where does gravity come from? Or where does electromagnetism come from? Well, nobody knows these things. Physics doesn't even try to really talk about where they come from. They just describe the effects of them. They know they exist because of all the effects that they produce. Electromagnetism, gravity, well, there's debate about whether gravity is real or not. But anyway, the forces of nature, where do they come from? Well, that is irrelevant to understanding how the forces of nature work. The same is true with consciousness. We don't know where it comes from, but we know that it works. And consciousness necessarily implies or necessitates volition. To say that conscious beings do not have choices, are not volitional, is to say that conscious beings and non-conscious beings are the same. Or rather, rocks and animals operate under just material, deterministic or random ways. This is to deny the facts of reality, the facts that things are conscious, that I am conscious, that you listening are conscious, that we use our perception to take in things, but we don't stop with perception. We abstract into concepts. So we do not live just at the perceptual level of the moment. Animals, of course, some animals, you can argue that they have some sort of minor abstractions and things. But in general, they just live in the present. For instance, if you and I were in the forest and we we had no ability to talk no ability for written or spoken language. We would only be able to communicate using like gestures and grunts and things. And necessarily, we would only be able to communicate about what's happening in the moment. There's no way that I could communicate to you about something that happened 2 days ago versus 2 years ago, or likewise in the future. We wouldn't be able to exist outside of just the present. Nietzsche said this quite beautifully, that the animal lives ahistorically. We do not. We have historical existences. We understand the past, the present, and the future. And how do we do this? Well, using reason and forming concepts. Concepts exist outside of the moment. So we cannot be reduced to the perceptual level. This is what makes us uniquely human. This is why our nature is as a conceptual being, a conceptual, rational being. So therefore, the dualism versus materialism debate is just a false dichotomy, as with many false dichotomies, because it doesn't view the individual as the integrated whole. It doesn't view, it doesn't integrate, quite simply. It divides things up and tries to break them down and deduce. Well, if you just keep breaking up and deducing, you'll just get to particles. And then if particles make up everything, then you could understand everything by just studying particles, which makes no sense. No, we have groupings of things that have identities, that have certain natures. And we know these things because we have formed concepts that group them together by similarity, and they have certain characteristics. And if they are conscious, they act in a certain way. So I hope hope you enjoyed me actually thinking today. If you disagree and think I did a bad job thinking, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.